Hey guys, thought it'd be a really good idea just to do a little basic stability program that I've been giving some of my clients, just to reestablish some connections into stabilizing the pelvis and being able to mobilize the legs, or stabilizing the pelvis and being able to move into the upper back. So this is good for anybody with low back pain or just has an area of instability around the low back and pelvis. So follow along with me and use a headlock if you need to. So we're going to start with just letting the pelvis come up and drop heavy into the mat. So lift, let it feel really heavy. So you want to feel the bones of the pelvis kind of dropping into the floor. So we're going to do that a few times, let it spread out. So I feel the weight of the sacrum on the mat. Okay, bring your feet in line with your sitting bones. And then we're just going to start to arc through the leg, alternating sides. I'm going to breathe out as I'm arcing. Now I'm putting my hands here at the crease where the leg meets the pelvis, and I'm trying to soften the muscles at the front of the leg. So I want to imagine that someone's holding my leg and picking it up and folding it into the hip rather than pulling from the front of the hip. Okay, so I want it to feel like a cog that's turning. And I want to just really focus on the pelvis staying in that really heavy zone. So it's not tipping side to side. And I'm really breathing and almost sighing its weight into the floor. So you should feel your abdominals just sinking gently. And just trying to feel the lightness of the leg as it arcs. So I'm feeling the weight through the supporting foot and through the pelvis, and just keeping that weight really balanced. And if you feel like the front of the hip is really charging up and tensing, then just soften, feel the scoop of the leg. Okay, so it's like an arc of the leg. So do that a few times until you feel that you're starting to gain that feeling of stability in the low back and the pelvis. Okay, then I want you to put your hands just behind the sacral bone, and I want you to start to let your right leg fall and rotate in the hip, but I want you to put a little bit of pressure into your left hand, so that side of the pelvis is staying a little bit more into the hand. See how far you can go before the weight comes off and you start to rotate, and then come back up. So I would exhale. So now I'm going on the left leg, feeling the right hand. Taking a pause in the middle, going that a little bit further. So it's giving me feedback by having my hands here. You don't have to, but then I can feel when the pelvis comes away from my hand. So right leg, we're thinking left side of the pelvis. I'm not forcing it with muscles and squeezing. I'm just trying to keep the pressure there. If it's helpful to not have the right hand there, but I find it's a little bit more helpful to have it balanced to start with. And back. So doing that a few times again to gain some sense of stability here in the pelvis. So again, you want to feel the stabilizers, the deep support system working. And if you find that your pelvis is spilling over, don't let your leg go that far. Okay, so we're only finding the range of movement. Feel free though to inhale and then exhale it, letting go a little bit further if possible. Okay, taking your head back away, we're going to try and do some bridging. I want you to feel your feet melting into the floor. And I want you to scoop up the pelvis, but not overly tuck the tail, okay? So I'm going to scoop up the pelvis, and I'm going to go to where it feels kind of comfy to be, where I'm not kind of working too hard. And then I want to focus on opening up the space here through the front of the hips and connecting up. I'm not squeezing my bum, but I'm trying to focus on here. And the big thing is to make sure that your low back is really lengthening out, okay? So I'm trying to keep the space here between the ribs and the pelvis. I don't want to go up into these kind of high bridges because then my low back is shortened now. Okay, so I want to keep the low back lengthened. On the way down, imagine the pelvis is going closer towards the feet. And you can maybe even give yourself a little bit of traction here. So I'm not trying to heave this down, I'm trying to lengthen it across. You might find then your shoulders start to go up, so just be aware of that. Okay, so I'm going to melt through the feet. I'm going to start to come up. And my pelvis is slightly sloped, but I'm not over bending into the low back, okay? And then coming up, If you find some restrictions here in your hips, you might want to do some releasing into the front of the hips and into your quads. Look back at our previous videos of quadricep releasing. That'll be really helpful for you here. Okay, so connecting up. So I can slowly feel my bum coming on. I'm just trying to find length in space, feeling like the sacrum is reaching out towards the front of the room. And then I'm kind of letting go of the back of the legs. As if they stay switched on, I'm gonna only move there. So I'm letting go of the back of the legs and noticing how the upper back kind of melts down. And I would do this 5 to 10 times, really finding space. If that feels good and you want to challenge it a little bit more, then I want you to hug one leg into your chest, not overly squashing, and then see if you can come up. And this is very challenging, coming up into the one side and still finding space in your low back. That's really, really challenging. The back will want to maybe give here. So I might not get very far, and then come down. Okay, so flexing at the hip, melting through the foot. And you can see I'm very wobbly. So I'm trying to connect again up that back of the leg. So do a few on that side and check in how the other side feels. Let's just have a look. Okay, from this end, so I'm still focusing there, and I'm focusing on going out. This is very, very, very challenging, especially if we've got some restrictions here. Okay, you're gonna find things that pick you up is more the low back, or you just don't get as far as you could with the two. And challenge yourself to get up to kind of 5 to 10 of those. Just have a little roll around. You don't have to go to that single leg level, so if that feels enough just to work with the double legs, then work on that. So we're going to come onto your front. It might be hard to see, but what I'm doing with the pelvis is just sending it down the mat a little bit. Okay, so into a gentle 12. I don't want to force it too much into the back, but I want to stabilize again the pelvis. So you might think about the low back kind of lengthening out. I want to make sure when I'm on the floor, I'm not pushing my ribs down. So I'm going to reset the ribs and then just place the hands under the head. So keeping that position, and you're going to have your head down, I want you to just softly bend into one leg. And what I'm trying to avoid is the pelvis doing that, so coming out of the position. So I'm thinking space here in the front of the hip and keeping that sacrum kind of down. I'm also thinking of the movement coming from the front of my leg to loop around the knee rather than just pulling the heel to the bum. Okay, so I'm going to exhale. And inhale down. And exhale. So it doesn't look like much, okay, but what you'll feel is a connection kind of up the back of the legs. Now, if you just feel hamstrings, and you don't feel the connection into your bum, you're losing the stability in the pelvis. Okay, so go back to that feeling of 12, and you should feel the deep support system in the front pick up and support you there. Okay, so we're looking to keep that little bit of 12. And I can feel the difference in one side, so I'm really thinking about coming down through the front as if my leg attaches underneath my rib. I can feel that that side connects a little bit better than my right side. So just be aware of the difference in sides. And once you've done that about 10 times, 5 on each side, you're going to bend the knees, turn the legs out a little bit, and have a little wiggle. If any of this hurts, don't do it. Okay, find a place of pain-free movement. So I'm going to connect the pelvis down a little bit here again, finding space in the hips. So if you find that you're slamming your hips down, we're going to be shortening into the back. Okay, equally, so I don't want to push so much that I start rounding into the upper back. So all I'm going to do is just gently, you can kind of see on the video, and gently press my heels together to feel the connection through the glutes, and then release, and the bum should kind of spread out. So I'm just pressing into the heels and release. And it's a feeling like the leg bones are rotating into each other rather than I'm just squeezing and pressing. If I squeeze and press, my hamstrings just kick on. So I want this feeling of wrapping around and into the heels. Okay, so my leg bones are spiraling to meet the heels together, okay? And that connects me there. So again, 5 to 10 of those, noticing if your tail is here and the hips are up, we're not gonna have the same connection, okay? I'm gonna lay the legs down again, have another little wiggle, and take the hands out to the side. Now we're gonna go into a little swan prep, okay? So what I wanna make sure of is that the low back is staying long, and those little bony bits that stick out in the back of your spine are called the spinous processes. So we want to imagine that those little bony bits that stick out to the back are actually going through the center of you and coming up. This gives that sense of an arc pattern going up. So rather than me back bending, I'm actually going forward and up, okay? So I'm going to take a breath in, and I want you to feel those legs reaching down softly. I'm not tensing the sacrum down in that space in the hips. So we're going to breathe in, and then keeping that low back space in the space in the hips, you're going to feel those spinous processes going forward and up. Okay, and I'm just going as far as I'm not shortening the low back. So if I start feeling my belly pushing down and the low back shortening, then I'm not going to go as far. Okay, so we want to think about going out, finding space. Okay, and then back down. So inhale, feel like the legs are reaching down. And then from the pubic bone, coming all the way up through the front of you, you want to feel like this elastic in the front. Let the shoulders be free to move. You might find that your elbows are pulling back slightly. And I keep finding space all the way up the spine. You can see I went a little bit further, but I'm not shortening into my back. Okay, I'm trying to find length and then come back. If you find that you're really getting restricted, then add a little bit of rotation, and that can free up the system quite a lot. So I'm going out, and then looking over the shoulder, and out, looking over the shoulder. Really helpful to do that on an exhalation. If you want your hands further back, or maybe here, here's a nice little place to do the swans. That moves the shoulder blades a little bit more, but you might find that that shortens your back. So go with what feels good. Okay, doing some rotations, keeping the space in the hips, and keeping the space in the low back. Awesome. And I'm just going to come back into an all fours position. Okay, I want you to just spread the hands, finding space at the wrists and the elbows and the shoulders, lengthening out so we don't want to be hunched down. And I'm just going to sit back and really feeling like the sacrum is staying level. So I don't want it to pull down or to arch up. So I'm just going back into my hips, and then inhale back. And exhale back into my hips. And really thinking about the legs inserting into the groin, so they don't insert on the side. So I want to consider my legs going more into my groin. And back. And just breathing out and noticing that point where the pelvis either wants to go down or potentially up too high. So I'm just keeping that space, and also making sure the shoulders don't start collapsing. So I'm keeping the space where the neck meets the shoulders and going back. And then coming up, finding that balance between your hands and your knees, and just taking an exhalation to scoop the arm and seeing if you can keep the balance of your sacrum. Okay, so we're not tucking under or dropping. We're going to keep that length. Good, breathing out, stabilize through the one arm, exhale the other. And notice I'm not bringing it super high and reaching it out. I'm really focusing on the limbs that are staying on the ground. Okay, doing a little bit through the back of through the legs is a little bit harder. So I'm trying not to shift over to the one side. So you can keep the foot on the ground, or you can slide it off the floor. Okay, and this is where we tend to kind of dip into the back. So I want to maintain that stability, maintain that length. And just take a break if it feels a little bit hard on the wrist and come back to it. So try and do 10 arms alternating, so 5 on each side, and 10 legs. And then we're going to come down to here. Now if you're not able to come right down and keep working on that. Or you can come up, prop yourself up a little bit higher. It might not work as well up here, but you can give it a good shot. So we're going to draw back and find the elbows right by the knees. Okay, we're going to place our hand at the back of the neck. So I'm trying to keep elongated so I can sense if my neck lifts up here. Okay? I'm going to send my elbow out and keep the length in the head and start coming up into a little thoracic extension. So I'm going to lengthen the elbow as much as I can and then let it scoop up. My neck wants to pull back. So I'm going to keep my neck really stable there. Really breathing. Okay, so I'm keeping this nice and stable, taking that hand behind. I'm trying not to pull back, letting the elbow go as far forward as I can without pinching into the neck, and then coming out. Now this is really working my upper back, really breathing out. And I can do about 2 on each side and I'm fatigued, so you might do 2 and 2, come back and do another 2 and another 2. So you should be feeling that up in the upper back, giving us some mobility there without it coming into the low back. I hope you found that really helpful and it feels good when you practice it, that you're going to get some more core connection into your abdominals and more so stabilizing the pelvis. So sometimes it's not a matter of strengthening, it's a matter of timing, and that we've ended up getting our low backs really hyper flexible, and they need to come back to a state where they're really more stable, so then we can become more mobile in our hips and more mobile in our upper back. So thank you for watching and take care.